Buddy, what's up? It's Harv. Let's get ready to roll and let's talk about the end of the Cold War. The end of the Cold War, ladies and gentlemen, is super important because we are going to see the Soviet Union fall and the collapse of communism in Europe and especially in Eastern Europe. Okay. Now, the end of the Soviet influence in Eastern Europe, the collapse of the Soviet Union, is a defining moment of the second half of the 20th century. It's identical in importance to the 19th century, the unifications of Germany, of Italy, all that nationalism. We're going to see a lot of similarities, except this time we're going to see some countries. We're going to see some countries, unified again. Germany will be, unified again, but we're going to see, the Soviet Union break up. So as opposed to, unification of the 19th century where countries are uniting, the Soviet Union is going to completely collapse, and we're going to see a lot of new nations come out of that. Okay? Now, the Soviet Union, ladies and gentlemen, imploded. There are external factors, okay? But there's the main reasons why the Soviet Union is going to dissolve is internal factors, and we're going to get into some of those and talk about it, okay? So we're going to see it divided into separate successor states like Belarus. The Ukraine is going to come back in, okay? And it starts a little bit under Brezhnev, okay? Brezhnev became more Stalin-esque as his reign kind of followed throughout the years. He's going to become very anti-Semitic, okay? And harass the Jewish population. He's going to put, political opponents in jail. Censor people. Brezhnev is going to be very repressive. All right. And this is going to, the Russians, the Soviets are very used to this and whatnot, but one of the big changes is going to be what's going on with their economy. And the economy is going to be one of the main facilitators of why changes are going to have to be made. Changes are going to be made under Mikhail Gorbachev. Hopefully I'm pronouncing that right. Okay. There's a couple reasons why Gorbachev is going to have to make some reforms. Number one is their economy. And the economy is going to be the key reason of why the Soviet Union is going to dissolve. Many historians believe that the Cold War was won economically. And I can see that. One of the main reasons why the Soviet Union is going to, their economy is going to be so bad is because they're trying to compete with the United States for spending and military spending, and they simply can't. Okay, the United States is simply, and many historians, kind of use this quote: the United States simply outspent the Soviets to win the Cold War. They ruined them economically. So it's quite interesting take, but that is true. The Soviet Union economy is going to collapse under the extreme pressures of financing this Afghanistan war and trying to compete with the United States in military spending. Okay, they also had a lot of economic corruption going on with their oligarchs, which we'll talk about a little bit with Putin. All right, so Brezhnev will die, and we're going to see a couple different successors, but Gorbachev is the one who is going to make the big changes, and the Soviet Union will fall under him. And he's really put into a tough position, which we're going to get into. But he's going to be forced to institute reforms that get him kicked out from power and forced to end the Soviet Union. But he kind of has to, because things are so bad in the Soviet Union when he takes over. The main reforms that he's going to initiate that we have to know, ladies and gentlemen, are Perestroika and Glasnost. Okay, and we're going to get into each of these. All right, Perestroika is the changes that he's going to make to their economy. All right. The Russian economy, because they're involved in they were involved in the Afghanistan war. They're trying to compete with the United States when it comes to military spending. Their economy is in shambles, and it is terrible. And we are going to see Gorbachev introduce Perestroika, aka restructuring. And what does he do? He's going to introduce capitalism, private ownership, free market system, laissez-faire economics. He is going to abandon Marxism economically. Super important. And he is doing this in order to try to reinvigorate, rejuvenate the Russian economy. Now, these economic policies are going to fail because the Russian economy, just by switching your economic philosophy and ideology from communism to capitalism isn't just going to, turn the economy, into high gear and make it, start producing a whole bunch of good and making a lot of money. It doesn't work like that. And so their economy is still going to be stagnant. And some of these policies, are going to fall. The Perestroika is going to kind of fall flat on its face because, well, they haven't been capitalists for a long time. And so these policies are not going to kind of create the change that he needs to get support from the public. Because of this, he's going to have to institute more changes in order to prevent, an uprising or prevent, a lot of people from protesting and complaining. In order to make sure the people are happy, Gorbachev's going to have to make some more changes, and that is Glasnost. These are some of the political and social changes that he makes. Okay, Gorbachev is going to start allowing for criticism, more freedom of speech, freedom of expression, less censorship. Okay, he's going to allow for debates, going to allow for some free elections. So he's making clear changes away from their traditional communist totalitarian doctrine in order to gain support from the people, and he's doing this because their economy is so bad. He's trying to make some of these changes in order to get the support of the people. All right? But despite some of these reforms, things are not going to do very well, and something that the Soviet Union is suffering from that many former empires know lots about, the Russian Empire knows lots about, the German Empire knows lots about, and Austria knows lots about, is nationalism. There's a lot of ethnic minorities within the Soviet Union that want their own country, and they will get it. Okay, and there's Gorbachev right there with Ronald Reagan. Gorbachev is still alive today. It's 2020, but he is still alive today. Now, if communism is starting to collapse in Eastern Europe, the Soviet Union, it's going to also subsequently collapse in Eastern Europe as well. And we're going to start to see that in Poland. Okay, Poland, we're going to see that the communist government, they're not going to be able to control that that Solidarity Party that we talked about. And we are going to see Poland elect, and appoint a non-communist prime minister in 1989. 1989, that's an important year because we are starting to see the Cold War end and the birth of Harv, me. Hungary, ladies and gentlemen, we are going to see Hungary do the same thing. They're going to have a socialist party take over for the Communist Party, and they are going to promise free elections. And so we're starting to see the changes in Eastern Europe as well. Germany will be reunited in the early 1990s. All right? Gorbachev is not going to support the East German leaders. We're going to see East Germany open Berlin, open the Berlin Wall, and Germany will be reunited, which is really interesting. Think about the evolution of Germany. We're going to take a look at a map on this today, but think about how much Germany has gone through. 1914, World War I, they're one of the predominant powers. They lose that. Great Depression, fascism, end up with Hitler. They fight another war, lose that, lose even more territory. And they were divided all the way from 1945 until the early 1990s. So this is big because Germany is finally reunified. And they're going to have some stability. Czechoslovakia, again, we're going to see some clear changes. They're going to restructure their government away from communism. Romania is the only place where you see violent revolution. And in Romania, the communist leader, fired on the opposition crowds. He's going to be overthrown and executed, but that's the only instance we really see of violence. Now, one of the reasons why Gorbachev is not going to resort to violence when he, as Eastern Europe kind of frees itself, is because of what happened in China at the same time in the late. I believe Tiananmen Square was in 1989. Correct me if not in the comments. But in China there was protests against the communist regime. And if anybody's ever seen the very famous picture of I believe it was a Chinese citizen standing in front of a tank, in China they fired on the citizens and they started killing them very violently, and that really created a big outcry. The rest of the world and a lot of the outside world condemned China for that violence and made them look really, really, really bad. Gorbachev did not want that. He did not want any violence to start up, and he knew that if he did that, it would make the Soviet Union, it would make this problem really worse for the Soviet Union. So he's gonna he's going to hold off on that and really restrain the Red Army and the Communist Party from attacking these Eastern European countries. There's a picture of the Solidarity Party. And here's a picture of Germany and its evolution. Just take a look at this. Okay, we have them in 1914, the German Empire. After the war, Treaty of Versailles, you see it split up, and there's Poland. We have them at the height of Nazi power. Well, arguably the height of Nazi power. Okay, where they've taken over parts of Poland. Okay, Anschluss. Okay, taken over part of Czechoslovakia as well. This is after the war. And this is them pretty much today. Very interesting. Okay, and here is a picture of the fall of the Berlin Wall. And you can see videos on this. It's on YouTube. It's fascinating. But, the Berlin Wall fell in my lifetime. So pretty incredible. The fall of the Berlin Wall really was symbolic of the collapse of communism and the collapse of the Soviet Union. Very much a symbol of that. Okay? None of these revolutions would have happened without Gorbachev refusing to intervene militarily. And he's doing this because, number one, is he doesn't want to have the Soviet Union be seen as butchers. Two, this was kind of inevitable, this revolution spreading. And also, three, Gorbachev probably, I believe he couldn't afford it. Their economy was so bad, it just, their military couldn't do this. All right, and have a full-scale war with, all of Eastern Europe. All right. So, Gorbachev is going to renounce the Brezhnev Doctrine, refuse to interfere and intervene on the behalf of communists, and we're seeing this the Soviet Union fall. And, for the first time since 1945, Eastern Europeans had self-determination. They could shape their own political future. Remember, that was what the Allies wanted. That's what Roosevelt, Churchill wanted, and from Stalin. And that was what, eventually Stalin, he's going to refuse to do. So Eastern Europe has self-determination, okay? And we're going to see Gorbachev withdraw his troops peacefully, okay? And again, like I talked about before, this peaceful character of the revolutions is a direct and very deliberate contrast from the Tiananmen Square massacres in China, okay? So, Gorbachev believed the Soviet Union could no longer afford to support communist governments in Eastern Europe if the Soviet economy was to be restructured. And he's right. He simply could not afford to prop up those governments, afford to have the military out there. Their economy couldn't support it, okay, because they were so weak economically. He also concluded that the Communist Party must be restructured in order to help the Soviet Union in its economy. And so he's going to announce that the Soviet Communist Party is going to abandon its monopoly on power. And you're going to start to see major political groups vie for power. All right? The conservatives who are communists, okay, kind of the old guard who wants the Communist Party in power. You're going to have reformers led by a guy named Yeltsin. We're going to talk about him. He's going to be the president of the Russian Republic after the fall of the Soviet Union. And the reformers wanted to go to a market economy and democracy. And you're going to have strong nationalist groups and nationalists who want their own country. Latvia, Lithuania, okay, Kazakhstan, Ukraine, all right? And so you had these, ethnic groups within the Soviet Union. This is something that we talked about in the 1800s, early 1900s. You had these, ethnic groups who want, their independence in their own country. Same thing in the Soviet Union, okay? And so we're going to see the Soviet Union fall, and you're going to see a lot of new countries come out of that. Okay? Now, the communists are so upset with Gorbachev. They're upset with Perestroika, Glasnost. They're upset with Gorbachev renouncing their monopoly on power. And they're going to place Gorbachev under house arrest and attempt a coup. Kind of just like Napoleon. Kind of just like Hitler, all right? And the coup is going to fail because of Boris Yeltsin's followers. And this was like going on live. You can see some of this on television. But also because of the people. The people were, did not want a gigantic fight to break out and another civil war to break out in Russia in the Soviet Union, and so this coup is going to fail. All right, simply because Russia didn't want to have that fight. They did not want it to go down. Okay, and also Yeltsin. Yeltsin was very competent, and he and his supporters are going to really dissuade the communists from going down that path, because it would have been really bloody and really bad. Gorbachev is going to be humiliated by this, but what we're starting to see is the dissolution of the Soviet Union, and Yeltsin is kind of taking control of Russia. Now, so we're starting to see the Soviet Union collapse. Obviously, the biggest country within the Soviet Union is Russia, and we're seeing kind of Russia, Gorbachev is losing power within the Soviet Union, but he's also losing power within Russia, which is the epicenter of the Soviet Union, and you're seeing Yeltsin kind of take his power away. All right, and the people are going to be supporting him. All right, so we're seeing the Soviet Union collapse. It's going to collapse with the Communist Party. Gorbachev is going to leave, and we're going to see a new kind of commonwealth of independent states appear. And we're going to take a look at a map. The Soviet Union is going to be broken up into a whole bunch of new countries. Okay, and let's take a look at the map, and then I'll come back and finish that slide. But you're going to see new countries like Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania. Russia still owns this territory right here. It's formerly belonging to Germany, Eastern Prussia. Okay. But you can see there's Kazakhstan, Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan, Georgia, okay, Belarus, all these new countries within the former Soviet Union. Okay, and obviously Russia being the biggest country within the former Soviet Union. This is huge, ladies and gentlemen. It's so important for a couple of reasons. Number one, it's going to completely discredit communism. Marxism, the failure of Marxism. And so this is going to be just really a dark moment for communists, okay? The Soviet Union, which, rose during World War I with Lenin, has collapsed and it has failed, okay? So this is really going to be a huge moment for Marxism and really illustrate the failure of Marxism to the world, okay? So Boris Yeltsin is going to be the new president of Russia, okay, the biggest and strongest country in this new commonwealth. He was supported by the West because, he was going to institute some big changes like capitalism and democracy. They're going to have a new parliament, a new constitution. They're going to be at war with Chechnya. Let's go back to the map real quick and look. Chechnya is right here. It was a Muslim province within the Soviet Union, and they were fighting based off of territorial and religious differences. Yeltsin is going to make it a priority to privatize, inject capitalism into Russia's economy. But this is really important. We're going to talk about this, ladies and gentlemen. Even though Yeltsin and Russia can change economically, one of the big problems they have is these powerful oligarchs. Almost like the Italian city-states, like the Medici family. They're these powerful oligarchs in Russia that are really influential, very corrupt, and that's really going to hurt their economy because there's so much corruption going on. They're going to default on international debts. There's going to be political assassinations. There's going to be a lot of instability, and eventually Yeltsin is going to resign and be replaced by Vladimir Putin. And we are going to see Vladimir Putin, and we'll talk about him. You probably heard a lot about him in the news today, just with what's been going on with Russia interfering in the United States elections, okay? But Vladimir Putin, he's former KGB. He was kind of like a former spy within the old Soviet Union, and he is going to become the new leader, and we're going to talk about him. He is now the dictator of Russia. He's the president and prime minister, but he's been in power since the late 1990s, and he hasn't given it up. All right, here's a picture of the Chechnyan war, the Chechnyan conflict. There's still problems today in Chechnya. It's definitely an area of concern for Russia. Now, these are the Balkans, ladies and gentlemen. We talked about the Balkans in World War I, right? This was the powder keg that erupted. We're going to see a lot of instability in the Balkans as well at the same time that the Soviet Union is collapsing, okay? So one of the big events that we're going to see is the collapse of Yugoslavia. Yugoslavia was a successor state. It came after World War I. All right. And we're going to see Yugoslavia get caught up in the collapse of communism. Now, you don't need to write everything down. I just want you to understand the main points here, ladies and gentlemen. But Yugoslavia, as you can see, this was the former Yugoslavia, this piece of territory right here. There's a lot of nationalities in there. And we know that if there's a lot of nationalities in there, they want their own country. So when the Yugoslav leader, his name was Tito, he dies, we're going to see civil war. And you're going to see a lot of different groups try to, jockey for power and create their own country out of Yugoslavia. So we're going to see countries like Slovenia, Croatia, Bosnia, Macedonia start to facilitate a lot of instability within Yugoslavia. A lot of these ethnic groups, all right, jockeying for power. You're going to see leaders in Serbia like Milosevic, okay, and Croatia, start to really create some instability within Yugoslavia. And you don't need to know all this, okay? Slovenia and Croatia are going to declare their independence from Yugoslavia. We're going to see a civil war erupt between the Serbs and Croatians over territory. Bosnia is going to get caught up in this. They're going to declare their independence. Also, during this time, we're going to see ethnic cleansing. We're going to see a genocide against Muslims in Bosnia. Okay, and there's going to be an ethnic cleansing by the Serbs against this. It is awful. But eventually, the United States and NATO, okay, are going to get involved and try to calm things down. All right, but the main point that I want you all to understand is the instability of the Balkans. Okay, and that really coincides with the collapse of communism in the late 1980s. Okay, and so we're going to see a new countries in the Balkans. Okay. Let's talk a little bit about Mr. Vladimir Putin. Okay, he's going to become the president. All right, and he is going to revive this war in Chechnya and really start to centralize power. Putin is a dictator. Okay, and he's a modern dictator. And he is going to, make it a point that he dominates both the economic, political, and social life of Russia. Now, early on in his tenure, he's going to try to break up the wealthy Russian oligarchs and families. But today, in 2020, this is 20 years later, there's still a lot of corrupt families in Russia. And Russia's economy is mainly, run and ruled by the oligarch families. Now, he tries to do this early on to gain support of the people, but Putin's pretty shady, and he, to this day, a lot of the oligarch families are still around. He's going to imprison political critics and opponents. He's going to leave office as the president in 2008, but remain as prime minister. And he's going to come back for power, and he is now both the president and the prime minister. Russia's interesting because Putin is going to try to facilitate a Russian economy, a Russian economic recovery. But the Russian economy is, heavily reliant on oil. And that's really where they make their money. It's a really interesting fact. Russia does not have that powerful of an economy today because they're really only reliant upon oil, and that's it. Now, that's great. That makes them a lot of money and whatnot. But there are other huge oil producers in the world, like Saudi Arabia, like the United States, and so Russia is still today behind economically, and they really don't have a big economy. I don't know if the facts are true or not, but I think recently I read that their economy is roughly the size of Italy's. So they don't really have the most powerful economy in the world, and they are not an economic juggernaut in the world. But their economy is predicated on oil. Okay, Vladimir Putin during his reign was very aggressive. He's going to invade Georgia, the country of Georgia. He's going to annex the Crimea. And one of the reasons why Vladimir Putin did this was he was responding to the expansion of the European Union and NATO in Eastern Europe, aka a lot of Eastern European countries like Poland, like Austria, Hungary were joining the EU and trying to join NATO. And he viewed this as aggressive, okay? And he did not like this. Remember, Russia wanted that buffer state. That's something that the Soviet Union wanted, okay? And so Putin was very upset with, kind of this Western United States influence in Europe. And he went out and annexed and took over the Ukrainian Crimea. Okay? In 2008, with the Great Recession, that really hurt the Russian economy. And now with the COVID-19, Russia's economy, because less people are driving. It's a world we're experiencing almost a worldwide recession right now because of COVID-19. It'll be interesting to see how Russia reacts to that, because Russia's main economic lifeline is oil, and we'll see. And also with climate change going on, and with the as we see the world kind of start to transition from fossil fuels, it'd be really interesting to see what happens with Russia's economy. Okay, here is a picture from some of that instability in Georgia. Terrible, the fighting. All right, and we are going to stop here and end our lecture on radical Islam tomorrow. Thanks everybody for joining.